with high intensity, dynamic storytelling, and an engaging emotional build-up. I should have trusted my gut that night, but instead, I sat in my car like an idiot, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached, watching my wife through the windshield as she stood outside some dimly lit bar, laughing a little too hard at something a man was saying. Not just any man. A man who wasn't me. The night had started normally. Jessica had told me she was going to dinner with coworkers, a team bonding thing. She barely looked at me as she left, distractedly saying not to wait up. But that sinking feeling had settled into my stomach again, the same one I had been trying to ignore for weeks. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I grabbed my keys and followed her. I didn't recognize the place she had driven to. It wasn't some upscale restaurant where professionals would gather after work. It was a bar. One of those dimly lit ones with a neon beer sign flickering against the windows, where people leaned too close and conversations slurred together. I stayed in my car, waiting, watching. I told myself I was being stupid, that any second now, I'd see her sitting with her coworkers, and I'd drive home feeling like an idiot. But then he walked out, tall, dark hair, confident stride. The way he reached for her waist with such casual familiarity made something inside me snap to attention. Jessica didn't pull away. She smiled. Not just any smile. The kind of smile I hadn't seen on her face in months. The kind of smile that wasn't meant for me anymore. She said something, he laughed. And then, without hesitation, she grabbed his tie and pulled him toward her. Not for a kiss, no, she wasn't that stupid. But it was intimate. The kind of move that was meant to linger, meant to tease, and meant to make it absolutely clear that I was watching something I was never supposed to see. My mind went blank. I could have stormed out right then and there. Could have made a scene, could have called her name and watched the color drain from her face. But I didn't. Because a new thought crept into my mind, one colder and sharper than anger. I needed proof. So instead of confronting her, I took out my phone. And I took pictures. A dozen. From different angles, making sure every single one captured exactly what was happening. Jessica flirting, touching, pressing too close. I even recorded a short video when she leaned into his ear, saying something that made him smirk like they had a secret. I had no idea what I was going to do with this proof yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I sat there, pulse hammering, as they finally went back inside. And then, instead of going home, I did something I never expected. I followed them in. I stepped inside the bar, the heavy scent of whiskey and sweat clinging to the air. The lighting was low, just enough to cast deep shadows across the faces of the patrons. But I spotted them instantly. Jessica and him. They had taken a booth near the back, tucked away just enough to give the illusion of privacy. My stomach turned as I watched her lean in, her fingers playing with the rim of her glass. Her lips parted slightly in a way that wasn't accidental. She was performing. Not for him, for us, once upon a time. But there was nothing accidental about the way his knee brushed against hers under the table, or the way she let it happen. I forced my feet to move. The anger that had been simmering in my veins since I saw them outside was now a controlled fire, no longer threatening to explode, but burning steady, ready. I didn't charge toward them. I didn't shout her name. That's what she would expect. Some dramatic, impulsive outburst she could twist into me being the crazy, jealous husband. No, I wouldn't give her that. Instead, I slid onto a bar stool, just close enough to hear them but not be seen. I ordered a drink I had no intention of touching, and I listened. At first, it was mindless small talk, nothing incriminating. But then, she laughed, that soft, sultry laugh that used to be mine alone, and said, "Last night was unreal. I still feel sore in the best way." My blood turned to ice. His chuckle was low, smug. "Told you I'd take care of you, didn't I?" Jessica sighed dramatically, swirling the straw in her drink. "You're trouble, you know that?" I wanted to lunge across the room and rip the smugness off his face. But I didn't move. Couldn't. Because my mind was too busy replaying last night. When she had come home late, muttering something about being exhausted from work, barely giving me a glance before crawling into bed. My bed. I had kissed her goodnight, told her I loved her, and all the while she had been thinking about him. My vision blurred at the edges, but I forced myself to stay focused. This wasn't enough. I needed more. I pulled out my phone under the bar and turned on the voice recorder. My hands were steady now, my pulse slow and calculated. I would not let her slip away from this. I would not let her gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid or insecure. She kept talking, reminiscing about their night together, her voice dripping with nostalgia, while he leaned back in his seat, watching her like she was something he had already claimed. My stomach twisted with disgust. And then, as if the universe had decided to hand me a golden opportunity, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. Shit, it's my wife. Jessica rolled her eyes. Just ignore it. His lips twitched in amusement as he silenced the call. She's suspicious lately. Thinks I'm cheating. Jessica smirked, taking a slow sip of her drink. You are. He laughed, shaking his head. Yeah, but not in the way she thinks. She assumes it's some random girl from work. If only she knew it was my boss's wife. Silence. A slow, suffocating kind of silence settled over me as my grip tightened around my phone. I had assumed she was cheating with some coworker, some nobody that didn't matter. But now, the pieces started to click together like a puzzle I had been too blind to see before. Jessica wasn't just betraying me. She was betraying her own boss's marriage. I didn't know what my next move was yet. But one thing became crystal clear to me in that moment. If Jessica thought she could get away with this, she was dead wrong. I left the bar before I did something reckless. My fists were clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms, but I kept my face blank as I walked past drunken laughter and the low hum of music. I needed to think. I needed a plan. Outside, the cool air hit me like a slap. My heart was still hammering in my chest, my skin buzzing with the kind of rage that didn't explode, it simmered. I unlocked my car, slid inside, and pulled my phone out again. The recording was still running. I hit stop, saving the file with shaking fingers. Proof. Not just of her cheating, but of his. My mind spun with possibilities. I could storm back in and confront them now. I could send the recording straight to his wife. I could wait until Jessica got home, pretend I didn't know, and set her up in a web of her own lies. But no, none of that was enough. I had spent years of my life building something with this woman. A life, a home, sacrifices, love. Only for her to throw it all away for a cheap thrill? For some affair with a married man who wasn't even trying to hide his arrogance? She was going to feel this. I scrolled through my contacts, found the number I needed, and hit call. It rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Is this Lauren? A pause. Cautious. Yes. Who is this? I could hear movement in the background, TV, maybe kids. A home. Her home. A home she probably thought was safe, just like I had thought mine was. I need to talk to you about your husband, I said carefully. And my wife. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Who are you? I hesitated for half a second, then said my name. Another pause. Then her voice came back, quiet but laced with something I recognized all too well, suspicion. What about them? I stared at the bar entrance, my jaw clenching. They're inside right now. Together. She exhaled sharply, and I could practically hear the way her mind was racing on the other end. You're sure? I tapped my screen, pulling up the photos I had taken, then the audio file. I have proof. A long silence. Then, where are you? I told her the name of the bar. Lauren didn't ask any more questions. She just said, I'm on my way. And then the line went dead. I sat back, gripping the steering wheel, my breath coming out slow. I had no idea what kind of woman Lauren was. If she would scream, cry, slap him across the face. But one thing was certain. Jessica's night was about to go straight to hell. That I didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes after I hung up, a sleek black SUV whipped into the parking lot, braking hard. The driver's door flung open, and out stepped a woman who looked like she had been holding in a storm for years. Lauren. Even in the dim streetlights, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand clenched her phone like it was a weapon. She was tall, blonde, wearing business casual clothes that told me she had come straight from somewhere important. A woman with a schedule. A woman who did not have time for this kind of nonsense. She scanned the parking lot, spotted me, and marched over. No hesitation, no fear. You're the husband? She asked, her voice tight. I nodded. And you're the wife. Her jaw flexed. Show me. I pulled up the photos first, held out my phone. She barely blinked as she scrolled through them, her eyes moving fast, absorbing every detail. When she got to the last one, the video, I saw her throat move as she swallowed. Then I played the audio. I watched her listen, her face still, but her fingers gripping my phone so tightly I thought she might crack the screen. When Jessica's voice came through, playful, smug, last night was unreal. I still feel sore in the best way. Lauren's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. And when her husband's voice followed, told you I'd take care of you, didn't I? A quiet, sharp breath escaped her. The kind of breath someone takes when they're holding back a scream. The recording ended. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, staring down at the phone like it might catch fire in her hands. Then, slowly, she exhaled. I knew, she muttered, almost to herself. I frowned. You knew? Her eyes flicked up to mine, and there was something in them that made my own anger pause for half a second. A kind of exhaustion that went deeper than just tonight. Not like this. Not who. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. She let out a sharp laugh, bitter. And I let him gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid. That hit home in a way I didn't expect. I had spent weeks second-guessing myself. Letting Jessica's dismissive attitude, her relax, babe tone, twist my gut instincts into knots. I had almost let her convince me I was crazy. But we weren't crazy. Our spouses were just really good liars. Lauren straightened, rolling back her shoulders. Whatever moment of vulnerability she had just allowed herself vanished, replaced by something colder, sharper. They're still inside? I nodded. She inhaled deeply, adjusting the strap of her purse. Good. Then she handed my phone back, turned on her heel, and strode toward the entrance like a woman walking into battle. I hesitated for half a second before following. Inside, the bar was even more packed now, voices overlapping with the clinking of glasses and the steady pulse of music. But I didn't care about any of it. My eyes were locked on them. Jessica and her boyfriend were still in their booth, leaning in too close, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass like she was flirting with the idea of something reckless. They had no idea what was coming. Lauren didn't slow down. She walked straight through the crowd, weaving past tipsy couples and bartenders slinging drinks, her eyes locked on one target. Then, when she reached their table, she picked up Jessica's drink and dumped it straight onto her husband's lap. The reaction was instant. He jerked back with a shout, cursing as the cold liquid soaked into his pants. Jessica gasped, eyes widening in shock as she whipped around to face the source of the attack, and froze. Lauren stood there, one hand still gripping the empty glass, her expression eerily calm. Her husband stared up at her in disbelief, his hands shaking droplets of spilled liquor onto the table. Jessica's gaze flickered past Lauren to me, and that's when the color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, maybe to lie, maybe to beg, but I beat her to it. Go ahead, I said, my voice cool. Tell me how I'm imagining things. Tell me how I'm overreacting. Tell me one of your cute little lies, Jessica. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because she knew. She knew she was caught. And this time, there was no way out. Jessica blinked fast, her mind scrambling for an escape, but there was none. Not this time. Across from her, Lauren's husband was still cursing, shaking the spilled drink off his expensive slacks. He looked up at his wife, his expression flipping between outrage and fear, like a man trying to decide if he should act offended or apologize. Lauren gave him no chance to do either. You absolute piece of garbage. Her voice was quiet, but the venom in it cut through the noise of the bar. I knew you were a liar. I just didn't know you were this pathetic. His jaw clenched. Lauren, shut up. Jessica flinched at the sharpness of Lauren's tone, and for the first time since I had walked into this mess, I saw something in my wife's eyes that I hadn't seen before. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. Good. I stepped forward, keeping my voice just as even as Lauren's. So? I asked Jessica. Nothing to say? She swallowed hard, her eyes darting between me and Lauren. Finally, she sucked in a breath and straightened her shoulders. And just like that, the fear vanished. The act dropped. Her lips curled into something almost like a smirk. Oh, come on, she said, feigning exasperation. Are we really doing this here? You're both acting like we committed a crime. Lauren let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking her head. Unbelievable. I felt something in my chest tighten. I had been waiting for Jessica to crack, to show some sign of remorse, to act like this was anything other than a joke to her. But no. Of course not. I had spent years married to a woman I clearly didn't know at all. I leaned down, resting my palms flat on the sticky surface of the table, lowering my voice just enough that she had to lean in slightly to hear me. Last night, you came home to me. You got in bed with me. And the whole time, you were thinking about him. I flicked my gaze toward her little boyfriend, who still hadn't dared to look in my direction. You're disgusting. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh, grow up. Lauren moved so fast even I was startled. In one swift motion, she slapped her wedding ring down on the table, the sound loud and final. I want a divorce. Her husband stiffened, his hands clenching into fists. Lauren, let's not save it. She turned to me, ignoring the man she had just declared herself done with. I don't know about you, but I'm not wasting another second on a liar. I looked down at the ring, then back at her. And just like that, I knew this was over. Jessica must have felt the shift, because her smirk faded. Wait! Her hand shot out like she was going to grab mine, but I pulled back. For the first time all night, she looked panicked. Babe, don't be like this. I laughed. Actually laughed. A short, humorless sound. Don't be like what, Jessica? Don't be mad? Don't be hurt? Don't feel completely sick to my stomach thinking about how I let you touch me while you were sneaking around with him. Her eyes widened slightly, but I wasn't done. You lied to my face, over and over. And for what? A cheap thrill? A little excitement. I shook my head, stepping back. You are nothing to me now. Her face twisted, something desperate flickering across it. I thought she might try to cry, try to play the victim. But instead, she did what she always did when she was cornered. She got mean. Oh, get over yourself. She threw up her hands. You act like I killed someone. Newsflash, people cheat. It happens. Lauren's husband gave a nervous laugh, clearly hoping to defuse things. She's right, man. No need to. Lauren turned on him so fast he actually flinched. Do not speak to him. Her voice was lethal, and for the first time all night, he actually looked nervous. Jessica sighed dramatically, leaning back. God, you two are exhausting. Fine. If you want to throw everything away over a little fun, be my guest. That was it. That was all she had to say for herself. Lauren exhaled, shaking her head, then turned to me. Come on. I'll buy you a drink. I nodded once, because there was nothing left to say. And without another glance at our cheating spouses, we turned and walked out. The night air hit differently this time. Less suffocating. Less heavy. It was strange. I had just walked away from my wife, from a life I thought I had, and yet, as the door shut behind me, I didn't feel the weight I expected. No gut-wrenching sadness. No desperate need to turn back. Just clarity. Lauren was already a few steps ahead, her heels clicking against the pavement as she marched toward her car. But then she stopped, hesitated, and turned back toward me. I wasn't kidding about that drink, she said, arms crossed, her voice softer than it had been all night. Less venom, more exhaustion. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. My adrenaline had carried me through everything that just happened, but now that I was standing here, my body was finally catching up. My limbs felt heavy, my mind still spinning from the sheer audacity of what Jessica had said back there. I could use one, I admitted. Lauren gave a small nod, then gestured toward her car. Follow me. We ended up at a quiet lounge on the other side of town, a stark contrast to the bar we had just left. Low lighting, soft jazz in the background, the kind of place where people came to talk, not scream over music. She ordered whiskey neat. I got the same. Neither of us spoke at first. It wasn't an awkward silence. More like necessary space. A moment to process. Finally, Lauren swirled her glass, watching the liquid inside. So, she said, what now? I huffed a short laugh. You tell me. You've already made up your mind. She met my eyes. Of course I have. She took a slow sip, then set her glass down with a quiet clink. There's nothing left to talk about. He made his choice, and I made mine. I wished I could say I was at that point, but the truth was, my head was still a mess. A war zone of emotions. I keep replaying it, I admitted. Not just tonight, everything. Every weird excuse. Every late night. Every time she looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me while she was screwing around with him. Lauren exhaled through her nose. Yeah, that part sucks. I studied her. She looked composed, strong, but there was something tired behind her eyes. How long? I asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. She shrugged, tracing a circle on the rim of her glass. If I had to guess? Probably a year. I blinked. A year? Lauren nodded. You heard what he said. I accused him before. It wasn't just some random gut feeling I knew. But he always had an answer. Always had a way of making me feel like I was crazy. I gritted my teeth. Same. She scoffed, shaking her head. It's like a game to them. How long can they get away with it? How much can they take before they get caught? She picked up her glass again, but instead of drinking, she stared into it. It makes me sick thinking about how many times he came home to me right after being with her. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Yeah. Silence stretched between us again. This time it was heavier. More bitter. Then, Lauren inhaled sharply, rolling her shoulders back like she was shaking something off. So, divorce for me. What about you? I hesitated. I should have had an answer. I wanted to say I had an answer, but my mind was still trying to untangle itself from the wreckage of my marriage. I don't know. Lauren studied me, tilting her head slightly. Can I ask you something? I nodded. If she begged you to stay, would you? I opened my mouth, ready to immediately say no. But something stopped me. Not because I wanted to stay, but because Jessica, who had barely even reacted tonight. Jessica who had smirked at me, who had mocked me, who had treated the entire thing like it was no big deal. Jessica who had not once tried to stop me from leaving. And that's when it hit me. She didn't care. She hadn't panicked until the very last second when she realized I was done. She hadn't cried, hadn't tried to beg for forgiveness. She had only reacted when she saw I wasn't buying into her act anymore. Lauren must have seen the realization on my face because she leaned back, letting out a quiet laugh. Yeah, I thought so. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my hands over my face. I think I already know my answer, I admitted. Lauren lifted her glass. Good. Now drink. I did. And for the first time all night, the fire in my chest started to cool that I woke up the next morning feeling like my entire world had shifted overnight. I barely remembered driving home from the lounge. My brain had been on autopilot, running through everything that had happened, every word Jessica had said, every look she had given me. Even now, lying in bed with the early morning light creeping through the blinds, I still couldn't wrap my head around it. She didn't care. That was the part that stuck with me the most. The fact that she hadn't fought for me, that she hadn't looked devastated, hadn't sobbed, hadn't done anything that a wife should do when she's caught destroying her marriage. She had just shrugged, like I was an old sweater she didn't want anymore. I sat up, my head pounding. The house was eerily silent. Jessica was still here. I knew that before I even checked. I could feel her presence in the house, like a weight pressing down on me. I got out of bed, the floor cold beneath my feet, and stepped into the hallway. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. For a brief, stupid second, I almost thought everything was normal, that I'd walk in and see her standing there, wearing one of my shirts, sipping from the mug she always stole from me, looking up with that sleepy smile she used to give me in the mornings. But that woman didn't exist anymore, and maybe she never had. I walked into the kitchen. Jessica was at the counter, stirring her coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. She was already dressed, tight leggings, fitted top, hair done, like she had somewhere to be, someone to impress. She glanced up at me, raising an eyebrow. "You look like hell." I didn't answer, just pulled out a chair and sat down, watching her. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't look at me like that." She took a slow sip, then leaned against the counter. "Are we really going to do this whole brooding silence thing? Because if you want to talk, let's talk. You stormed off last night before we even got a chance." I laughed. Actually laughed. "A chance?" I shook my head, running a hand over my face. "You mean before I got a chance to listen to more of your bullshit?" She sighed, setting her mug down. "You're being dramatic." That was it. That was all she had to say. I stared at her, my blood turning to ice. I had spent years loving this woman, believing in her, trusting her. And now sitting across from her, I didn't even recognize her. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was annoyed. Like I was the problem. "Wow," I muttered. "You really don't feel a single ounce of guilt, do you?" She gave a slow, exaggerated shrug. "I don't see the point. What's done is done." Something inside me snapped. "What's done is done." I repeated, my voice sharp. "You cheated on me, Jessica. Lied to me. And you're standing here acting like I should just get over it?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not like I meant for you to find out this way." I stared at her. "Are you serious right now? That's what you're worried about? That I found out the wrong way?" She crossed her arms. "I mean, yeah. It was humiliating, if you must know." "For who?" I shot back. "Because I sure as hell didn't see you looking embarrassed last night." She scoffed. "Oh, please. I saw you sitting there with Lauren, all buddy-buddy. You two looked pretty damn comfortable with each other for people who just had their lives ruined." I exhaled slowly, trying to control the urge to slam my fist on the table. "Don't deflect." She shook her head, laughing under her breath. "It's just funny, that's all. You're acting like I destroyed your life, and meanwhile, you're out having drinks with my affair partner's wife. Don't pretend you're some innocent victim here." That was it. That was the final nail in the coffin. I pushed back from the table, standing up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. Jessica flinched, but not in fear. In irritation. Like I was inconveniencing her. I looked her dead in the eyes and said the words I should have said last night. "I'm done." She blinked. "What?" "You heard me. I'm done. I want a divorce." Her mouth opened slightly, and for the first time all morning, she looked caught off guard. I didn't wait for a response. I turned, walked straight out of the kitchen, and headed toward the bedroom. I grabbed a suitcase, threw it open, and started packing. I didn't care where I went. I just knew I wasn't staying here. I was halfway through stuffing clothes into my suitcase when I heard Jessica's footsteps storming down the hall. Oh, so that's it? She snapped from the doorway. You're just gonna pack your bags and run away like a little kid? I didn't stop. I grabbed a handful of shirts, shoved them into the suitcase without folding them. I'm leaving, I said, voice steady. And then what? She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. You think you're just gonna go stay in a hotel and play the sad betrayed husband until you feel better? I didn't answer, because the truth was I hadn't thought that far ahead. I just knew I had to get out of here before I lost my mind. Jessica scoffed. You're being ridiculous. You don't have to do this. That made me stop. Slowly, I turned to face her. I don't have to do this? I repeated, my tone sharper now. Jessica, I just told you I wanted a divorce, and your reaction was to mock me. She rolled her eyes. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. That was it. That was the moment I realized she was never going to take responsibility. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't going to cry or beg or chase after me. She wasn't going to do anything, because she had already written me off. I clenched my jaw and went back to packing. Where are you even gonna go? She pressed, stepping into the room now. You don't have family in town. You barely hang out with friends anymore. What's your big plan, huh? I didn't have one, but I wasn't about to tell her that. Instead, I zipped up the suitcase, grabbed my keys off the dresser, and turned to face her one last time. Does it even bother you? I asked, my voice quieter now. At all? That I'm leaving? Jessica hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to think, maybe? Maybe this is finally hitting her. And then she gave me the most infuriating, gut-wrenching answer imaginable. I mean, she shrugged, her expression unreadable. It sucks, but I figured this was coming. Something inside me shattered. She knew. She had already accepted this. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had prepared for the fallout. I let out a slow breath, nodding to myself. That was all I needed to hear. Good luck with your new life, Jessica, I said, moving past her without another glance. And this time, she didn't try to stop me. I drove for hours. No destination, no plan. Just the open road, the hum of the tires, and the weight of everything pressing down on me like an avalanche. I should have felt free. I should have felt relieved. I had done it. I had walked out. I had finally cut myself loose from the web of Jessica's lies. So why did my chest still feel like it was caving in? The rage was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But now, with the confrontation over, something else crept in. A hollow sort of numbness. The kind that comes when you realize you just lost something that once meant everything. I didn't miss her. I missed the version of her I thought was real. The life I thought we had. The woman I believed loved me. But that woman never existed. At some point, I pulled into a gas station, mostly just to stop driving before I ran myself into a ditch. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to force my mind to quiet down. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. For a split second, I thought maybe it was Jessica finally realizing what she had done. But when I picked it up, I saw a different name. Lauren. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Did you leave? She asked, skipping any kind of greeting. I sighed, leaning back in my seat. Yeah. Packed my bags. Walked out. She barely blinked. A pause. Then figures. I glanced at the time. It was almost midnight. I hadn't realized how long I'd been driving aimlessly. What about you? I asked. Lauren exhaled. Filed for divorce this morning. I blinked. Already? Like I said, am not wasting another second on a liar. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion underneath it. I ran a hand through my hair. I should have done that first thing, too. You will, she said simply. You just needed to get out first. That's step one. I looked out the windshield, staring at nothing. I don't even know where I'm going. Lauren was quiet for a moment. Then you want to come over? I frowned. What? Not like that, she said quickly, as if she already knew where my mind was going. I just don't feel like being alone right now, and I have a spare room. No pressure. I hesitated. Lauren had handled all of this too well. Too strong. Too decisive. But maybe that was just the outside version of her. Maybe, deep down, she felt the same gnawing emptiness I did. And maybe, right now, neither of us needed to be alone. I exhaled. Send me your address. A second later, my phone buzzed again. I pulled out of the gas station and headed toward the one person who actually understood what I was going through. Lauren lived in a quiet neighborhood, one of those places with perfectly trimmed lawns and driveways big enough for 2 SUVs. It was the kind of home that looked lived in, not just owned. A place that had been built with memories. Memories that had been poisoned by a man who thought he could have it all. I parked outside, gripping the steering wheel for a moment before shutting off the engine. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I knocked on her door, but when it swung open, Lauren didn't look nearly as composed as she had back at the bar. She wasn't in her business casual armor anymore. Just an oversized sweatshirt, leggings, and bare feet. Her hair was in a messy bun, like she had started the day with every intention of being productive but never got around to it. "Hey," she said, stepping aside to let me in. The house smelled like lavender and something faintly sweet, vanilla maybe. It was warm, cozy, but something about it felt empty. "Nice place," I said. Lauren snorted. "Yeah, real homey. Too bad it was all built on a lie." She shut the door behind me, then walked toward the kitchen. I followed, unsure what else to do. On the counter, an open bottle of wine sat next to a half-empty glass. She grabbed another and poured without asking. She slid it toward me. "Drink." I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through me. For a few minutes, we just stood there, neither of us saying anything. Just two people whose lives had been shattered, standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out what came next. Finally, Lauren sighed, leaning against the counter. "Did she call you?" I shook my head. "Not once." Lauren's lips pressed into a thin line. "Same here. He didn't even try to come home. Probably staying at some hotel, hoping I'll calm down." She swirled her glass, staring into it. "Joke's on him. I changed the locks this morning." I huffed a small, humorless laugh. "Wish I had thought of that." She glanced at me. "You still have the house. You could." I frowned, the idea settling in my mind. Kicking Jessica out of our home? It felt like a power move. And yet some small, stupid part of me still clung to the fact that it had once been ours. Lauren must have seen the hesitation because she set her glass down with a sharp clink. "Listen to me. She's not your wife anymore." I looked at her. "I know that. Do you?" She challenged. "Because I've seen this before. Men who get cheated on, who walk away, but then boom, one text, one apology, one little tear-filled moment, and they stay." I clenched my jaw. "That's not me." "Good," she said. "Because she's going to call. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but she will. And if you're not careful, she's going to find a way to weasel back in. Not because she loves you. Not because she regrets it. But because she doesn't like losing." I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. Lauren pushed off the counter. "Come on." I frowned. "Where?" "Guest room." She gestured toward the hallway. "You look like you're about 5 minutes away from passing out. You can figure out your next move in the morning." I hesitated. "You sure?" Lauren gave me a look. "Do I seem like the kind of woman who says things she doesn't mean?" "Fair point." I nodded, picked up my bag, and followed her down the hall. The guest room was small but clean, the bed neatly made. It felt safe. Lauren lingered in the doorway. "Try to sleep." I met her gaze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was something unspoken between us, something we both understood without having to say it. We had both been lied to. Both been used. Both been tossed aside like we didn't matter. And yet, we were still standing. "Good night, Lauren." She gave a small, tired smile. "Good night." She shut the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. But for the first time in a long time, they didn't feel quite as heavy.